Okay, welcome Rabotai to our feature presentation of, say we can't say it, Rabbi, Doctor, Colonel, Sergeant Shai Bernstein on Israeli resilience. I just wanted to frame what's going to be happening and give just a small introduction. We just came off reading the very troubling story of Balak and Bil'am, and we see that the Sha'im, the evil people of the world, they definitely stop at nothing to get their, evil agenda not only pushed through, but to try to be on top. But if you look at the story of Balak and Bil'am, I want to share one insight with you, which really will help us to understand what I think the story is really about. Baruch Hashem, we're in a very educated audience. So how many times did Balak attempt to bring Bil'am towards the nation to curse them? How many times? 3. Everybody knows 3 times. But the sensitive reader of the text sees that these 3 times were not the same. And there are many different nuances between all of these 3 episodes. But I wanted to focus on one of them. If you'll notice, and I was giving this, I gave this shiur once before this past week, so it resonated with the crowd. Let's say a person is walking with a group of friends, and they really want to get the front seat of the car. So what do you have to yell out? What word do you have to yell out? Shotgun, exactly. So what's the standard shotgun rule? Can I call, let's say we're going to go to the car. Can I call shotgun from here? No, what's the rule? See the car. Wow, we got Bakim and shotgun rules. Right? You have to see the car. Baruch Hashem, you must see the car. So lahavdil, what does Balak do? On the first time, Balak brings Bil'am to a spot where he can see the entire nation. Doesn't work. The second time, the Torah highlights the word katzeh. What does katzeh mean? So literally the edge or the side. The katzeh, so he brings him to the side of the nation, also doesn't work. Third and final time, what's the highlight? There's a word that should hearken you back to Ovdei Avodah Zarah. That is the side of Peor. So the very famous Avodah Zarah of Bet Peor, that's really the side that we're going to be on. So that's the third and final time. And all 3 times are unsuccessful. So what's happening here? Why was it, panoramic view, katzeh, and then b'nei peor? So I saw a phenomenal pshat that says the following. When you want to curse somebody, what are you usually cursing? You're cursing a small aspect of that person. You had your blinker on to get a parking spot, the guy just swoops right in and gets the parking spot. Obviously, we would never really curse them. But now a person is thinking, oh, this person, bad guy. Well, what does he do? He steals parking spots. That's what he does. But are we taking a look, a panoramic view of the entire person? Are we looking at what this person does in terms of chesed, limud Torah, how he is as a family man, as a husband, how is he as a member of the community? No, we know he steals parking spots. Curse him. And it becomes very easy to do that. Balak is sort of working in reverse. He takes Bil'am, he says, okay, at first he thinks, it's like shotgun rules. How am I going to curse the entire nation? You got to see everybody. But when it doesn't work, Balak thinks, oh, you know why it's not working? Because now he's able to see the entire nation at work. He sees every nuance. He sees how they camp. It ends up being what sparks in his mind, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkerotecha Yisrael, where you can see now, wow, look how they interact with each other. Look at how their tents are situated. This is a great nation. I'm not just looking at one aspect, I'm looking at the entire picture. Can't be done. So Balak says, you know what? Let's go to the edge. Let's go to the katzeh, the shady part of the nation. Maybe that will work. That doesn't work also. Finally, he says, you know what? Let's go to the back side of the nation, the side that's right next to the tough characters, Bet Peor, like Mulda Avodah Zarah. Maybe then you can curse them. The guy who steals your parking spot, the guy that worships Avodah Zarah, even in that case, Bnei Israel, was impervious to the curses of Bilam. But the message is still clear. The entire story is really about perspective. It's about being able to see the entire picture of the nation. And seeing, actually if you go right before that, it says, Vaigal. What does that mean? The galot, to reveal. Bilam, the entire story, he's got these blinders on. He gets no hints. Whether, as Chazal teach us, right, his leg gets smashed, narrow through the crevices. He sees that the donkey, the aton, stops walking, and finally, even when the aton speaks, he doesn't get the message. What does he do? He talks back. Who talks back to the aton? Somebody who doesn't get it. Somebody who lacks perspective. And that's really what it's about with those 3 times with Balak taking Bilam, a lack of the perspective. And sometimes we suffer from that. We're not able to really see the entire picture. It's not often that we get somebody who is really able to speak to us about the entire perspective of what's going on in Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael, in Sahel. Shai, Bernstein and I, we go back, way back, Shai. Playing around when we were little kids, our parents really best of friends, almost literally growing up together in the summers, every time we visit each other in Israel. His father, Rabbi Dr. David Bernstein, runs the Pardes Institute. He taught us in the Sephardic Rabbinical College how to be teachers, really phenomenal, amazing pedagogue. And since October 7th, our families have really been on the edge of our seats. Obviously his family, more than ours, but we feel as my father and his father, we could say, Nafsho Keshurav and Nafsho. And all he's taught us, it's really something, phenomenal. You're really getting an inside perspective. And the specific topic is not only going to hopefully, give us a deeper perspective, but it's hopefully going to build up our resilience, something that we really need during this Ben HaMetzarim. And really when we look at ourselves as Jews and the Jewish nation, that's really the struggle. How do we persevere? How do we remain resilient throughout these times? A lot of us suffer from fatigue, from especially October 7th. We start off strong, and then all of a sudden now it becomes part of our lives and just something else that we do. So Shai is going to talk about so much of this in only the way that he knows how. And again, it's really my privilege to introduce my dear friend Shai Bernstein.
Hello everyone. May I ask that we maybe move forward a little bit? Is that okay? Just so that we feel a bit more comfortable. Some people in the back and move a little bit forward.
Cozy.
Great.
Shai, I got a call on it.
Thank you.
Right
No.
in the front row is it's legal.
Yes. What's it like in the rides? I was just with my kids. You may get sprayed by the.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Niftach b'chvoda shel Achsania. Thank you to this beautiful community. Thank you to Jesse and the whole congregation, Rav Aiki. I'm relatively new to Deal. We're just here for Shabbat 2 weeks ago, and it was beautiful. And I'm constantly amazed at just discovering more and more communities in this area. It's really beautiful and very special. I want to share just briefly, what we're going to do. I'm going to give a little bit of background on myself, and then talk about kind of a speech that I started to give. This is mostly my experience since October 7th. Then I have a few pictures that I think always help just visualize. And then we have some Q&A. So real quick, I was born on the Upper East Side. Don't hold it against me. Moved to Israel as a baby. We moved to Jerusalem. I grew up in Baka. Some would say, the 53rd state of America, together with maybe Ra'anana and Efrat. And people always ask my parents, are your kids more Israeli or more American? My parents have a good answer. They say, they're kind of like Israelis who use napkins and say please and thank you. And so there's some truth to that. Growing up, really feeling a hybrid situation because, I loved watching the NBA and the NFL back when I was in Israel. It's not always easy because sometimes it's the middle of the night, but I love sports, love music. I joke that I, love Bob Dylan and Simon and Garfunkel, but then also Ehud Banai and all the regular Israeli music that everyone loves. I studied for yeshiva in 2 years in Eli, and after that I was drafted into the army, to the Givati Brigade, and out of the Givati Brigade you then can try out to the voluntary units of the Special Forces of the Givati Brigade, and I was accepted into Seyeret Givati. Seyeret Givati is the reconnaissance unit, deals with special operations, gathering intelligence, arresting wanted terrorists, and so on. I moved to Riverdale 2 years ago, relocated with my wife and 3 kids. My wife's doing research at Columbia, so we're here for a fellowship. And I work in tech. Although I've been doing public speaking for almost 2 decades, really even before officers training course, but also during that, when I came back from the war, it took me a while. It wasn't easy at the beginning, and my wife and my mom, who's a trauma therapist, really kind of pushed me to start speaking, and so recently I've started. I gotta be honest, it's not always easy because it's a little bit raw, and as you can imagine, and as I'll speak, it's not always things that are pleasant to discuss or remember. Bet Hanun, just north of Gaza City, November 10th. It was humid and sticky. My chest and back were itching like 700 mosquito bites. A testament to the ceramic vest that hadn't been taken off for the past 11 days. I just changed my socks for the first time that week. Shoes need to be on our feet at all times. You never know when the next RPG may hit. The explosion was very loud. After that, only the sound of silence. A few seconds later, our military radio went haywire with soldiers shouting, reporting what they saw and asking for help with the evacuation. We were too far away from them. Moshe Leiter, zichrono livracha, a friend of mine who studied with me in Eli, was killed that night. His team had uncovered a tunnel under a mosque, a tunnel that was heavily booby-trapped with explosives. 4 soldiers were killed in that incident: Moshe, Yossi Hershkowitz, Matan Meir, and Sergei Shmerkin, zichronam livracha. Elisha Meidan, the son of Rabbi Yaakov Meidan from Yeshivat Gush Etzion, if you're familiar, lost his 2 legs in the same event. Moshe was married to Tzipi and has 6 children. The youngest is just a year old. He was finishing medical school after serving for 15 years in the elite unit of Shaldag. He was such a brave and talented person, incredible officer. His willpower was fierce, and he moved mountains, and he accomplished in his lifetime, in his 40 years, more than what many of us do in a lifetime. I didn't get a chance to go to his funeral because I was still inside. In fact, I missed the funeral and the Shiva since I was still in Gaza. When I saw a recording of the funeral, his wife Tzipi told the kids, from now on, your father is like everything important in life, like love, like happiness, like emunah, faith. We can't see them, but we know that they're in our hearts. I want to go back to the beginning, to October 7th. I came to shul, it was 9 a.m. In Riverdale, we start at 9. And I walked in, and a friend of mine came to me and said, "Did you hear what happened?" I said, "No." He said, "They broke the border with Gaza. There are more than 40 people killed near Ofakim, and they're hostages." Now I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "That's what I hear." If you guys remember those first days, bits of information. But it was very clear to me that I have to run to my phone, and I ran home. I turned on my phone, and the WhatsApp group of all the officers was going wild. I immediately booked my ticket. The flight was canceled 3 times that day because Ben Gurion Airport wasn't really understanding what was going on. But I was able to get on the first flight via London on October 8th. And so I was already with my unit. After I left to the airport, my kids, ages 9, 7, and 5, asked my wife, Nama, I said to her, "Why does Abba have to go?" And she answered so eloquently. She said, "When Israel needs us, we come." People asked me, people came to say goodbye to me during that, Yom Tov and Chag. And they said to me, "But do you have to go?" Also, I'm 41, right? And just kind of, you're living in New York now, like what? Do you have to go? I said, "I don't have to go, but I have to go." And I want to just share a quick conversation that my wife had with my kids. I learned this after I came back. One of the nights when she was putting them to sleep. Ella, who's 5, asks, "When will the war end?" Boaz, who's 7, says, "I heard there was a war in France that lasted 100 years. Nama, my wife, says, "It won't last 100 years. Ella says, "Maybe it's like Hanukkah, that depending on how long it was, then we'll have a holiday the same amount of the days." And they asked, "What happens if we don't win?" And Nama said, "Israel's gonna win." And they said, "How do you know, Ima?" I said, "Because we don't have a choice." And they asked, "What if Abba dies?" When I arrived in Israel, or better yet, in London, I told my parents, I said, "I need you to bring my miluim bag," right? I have a bag, we serve, my unit serves about 30 days every year. So I have a bag of miluim that's always ready. I told them where the bag is. I said, "You need to meet me at the airport because I have to go down south straight away." They met me at the airport. And my unit was tasked with securing the parameters of the Nova Festival. So we were helping Zaka with the bodies and searching for more terrorists in that area, because there still were terrorists in that area at the time. Words can't describe the aftermath of this attack. Only thing I can think that would describe is a movie set of Game of Thrones, or I don't know what. We then began organizing our equipment and our team for the ground operation. We started in Kibbutz Erez, and we walked 4.5 miles from Kibbutz Erez, which is in the Gaza envelope, into Bet Hanun. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with soldiers and kind of how it works, but That's why I have also some pictures afterwards to share, but it's not, there are a lot of challenging aspects of it. One of which that you're carrying 50% of your body weight and you're walking for 4.5 miles at night. But mostly, it's the fact that you know what you're going into. You're crossing the fence, you're crossing the border, you're going into enemy territory, and you know for a fact that Hamas has been preparing this for years. The booby traps, the tunnels.
7 years.
Everything, yes, 7 years. Even more, but it's since they've been good, yes. And you realize that at any point in time, there could be an ambush. I stopped counting the times that I had a close call or something that's worth saying a gomel, a gunfight with bullets hitting on the wall just above our heads, an RPG that just missed me, a booby trap that didn't go off for whatever reason. And at the beginning, and many times we felt it was a miracle. After a few incidents where people were injured and killed, we didn't feel so comfortable calling it a miracle anymore. Despite all this, it really is a miracle that I'm standing here, in this beautiful shul, on my 2 feet. At the beginning, I really struggled with the fact that I am here on my 2 feet and asking myself and my friends and, why them and not me? I don't have an answer, but I do know one of my closest friends who was severely injured said to me, God isn't finished with you yet. He has a plan for you. And he said, Shai, you're living in New York now. You need to tell firsthand stories. That's what you need to do now. And so that's why I started recently speaking in different places. Once we entered Gaza, my team, it's called the Chapak Samgad, which is the Deputy Battalion Commander Squad. We discovered a Hamas stronghold in an UNRWA school. So literally in the school where you see, a playground and you have Minnie Mouse stickers on the walls, we found a Hamas stronghold and we found multiple laptops and maps and a lot of intelligence that we then gave into our intelligence teams, and Herzl Levi, the chief of staff of the IDF, said that it played into strategic decisions for the next units that entered Gaza, because we went in first. We were one of the first units to went in and saved many lives. During this mission in the UNRWA school, my team of 6, we were 6 people, got hit by an RPG, and 3 out of 6 were wounded. And it's hard for me to explain to you what I'm saying. You're hearing the words of what I'm saying, but imagine that this is the wall, and I'm here with 2 other guys, and the other 3 over here, and there's a window, and that's where they got shot. I was there a minute before. I was gonna be there a minute after. I never thought that one can be in 2 places at the same time. But over the past 8 months, I keep going back and forth. Physically, because I went twice, and mentally. From America to Israel, from Gaza to New York City. One moment I'm on the phone with my friend who can't fall asleep because of the pain. Another one can't fall asleep because he had a nightmare. In that sense, the time difference actually helps us. And I remember that during one of these phone calls, I suddenly look at my watch and I say, oh, listen, I gotta call you back. I have a call in 5 minutes. And I get off the phone with him. Next thing I know, I'm on the phone with Citibank, talking about how we improve the user experience in the app and increase sales by 6%. Parallel universe. But this is our lived experience as Jews, right? This didn't start on October 7th. Throughout history, this is our story. My grandparents on both sides are sole Holocaust survivors. בכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו. What's crazy, of course, is to see it happening today in New York and in many places around the world. During my flight back to Israel from London, right? In other words, from New York to London and then to Israel, there were two flight attendants from London that saw that my ticket was going to Tel Aviv. This is October 8th, yeah? He said to me, "Sir, are you going to Israel?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What brings you to Israel?" Right? Especially in these times. When I explained to them that I'm going to join my unit, they couldn't believe it. They couldn't grasp what I was saying. He said to me, "I don't understand. If there was a war going on in my country, I would be running away. You're running towards the war. Where are your wife and kids?" I tell them, "In New York." I said, "Aren't you afraid?" Of course I am. But it's not about me or my family. It's about something larger than me, something larger than us. It's about Netzach Israel. We don't want to go to war, but we will not hesitate to protect ourselves and Jews around the world all the time. I think one of the most underestimated parts and components of the current situation is to understand really in depth what people in Israel are going through now, and specifically the miluimnikim, the reservists. Stories like mine, you have many. It's true, it's a bit unique because I live in New York, right? But you have so many families in Israel. People are doing more than 160 days already of miluim this year. It's crazy to think about. And I want to read something that I wrote in Gaza. It was nighttime and I was using a red infralight because you can't use real light. It was after a couple of very rough days that we had with a lot of injured soldiers and evacuations. I've seen with my own eyes. I've seen injured friends in the hospital who, despite the pain and long recovery process that await them, seem way stronger than me. I've seen Colonel Asaf Hamami's mom at his shiva. I almost fell apart right in front of her eyes. She was the strong one, not me. I've seen teachers, doctors, factory workers, and people working in tech, leaving their jobs and their families, giving it all they've got, even if it meant their lives. I've seen Matan, who voted for Meretz, Jonathan voted for Lapid, Guy, who voted for Bibi, having a fierce political argument. It was almost like a reality show of who loves Israel more. I've seen the four of them leap when we were scrambled, together as one. I've seen them run to aid the injured even though the bullets were flying over our heads. Each one carrying the stretcher, lending a shoulder, together. I've seen an impressive logistics team working day and night with hearts way larger than any storage facility. I've seen a Hamas station in an UNRWA school with missiles and rifles, tunnels with explosives, and a hospital. I've seen communities across the US buckling down, raising money, and working hard to send supplies and support to soldiers and citizens of Israel. I've seen a polarized and divided nation that became united in an instant. We realize that we're fighting not only for our lives, but for our right to exist in the second war of independence. There are many challenges, and at times it really does feel bleak. But we also see rays of light. We see hundreds and thousands, maybe even millions, of Jews all over the world coming to help each other and working together. So many stories on October 7th. Has anyone heard here of Elchanan Kalmanzon? A religious Dati Mitnachel, okay, lives in a settlement in Otniel. He lives in Otniel, he hears about this, and he takes his brother and his brother-in-law, and they go down to Kibbutz Be'eri, leaving their wives and children behind. Be'eri is a secular kibbutz, vast majority of them very much on the left, clearly not agreeing on many political aspects and many walks of life. But they went down to Be'eri, and for more than a day and a half, they kept going in and out and rescued more than 100 people. Literally, more than 100 lives, physical people that they saved. And if you look for it online, you can find testimonials of these people talking, and they say, like, who are these people? What right? One of them says, they're like angels. Says, who'd you come? You know? A week ago, we could have hated them. They could have hated us. And they came and risked their lives. And what's crazy? They didn't do it once. They kept going back and forth. And in the midst of it, they text their families and they send a picture. Could you imagine? What about their families? Et achai anochi mevakesh is what Menachem Kalmanzon said when he got the Pras Yisrael just now on Independence Day, Yom Ha'atzmaut. Elchanan was killed, his brother. Amash towards the end, he was killed. He walked in first to the house, and there was a terrorist there, and he was killed. I want to share also another short and sweet story, because it's important to look at these rays of light. When I was still here in the States, I was ready to get back, and I asked my friend, I said, look, I'm still here in America, waiting for the flight. Like, what can I buy? What do we need? And he says to me, you know what we need? You know those simple, dumb watches? Like the regular G-Shock watches that aren't, you know, a smart watch by Samsung or Apple or Garmin or whatever it is. They all have GPS. You can't use it in Gaza. So we need the old, regular, simple watches. So I go to the store, I think it was Macy's was the closest one that I had there. I bought everything they had, it was only like $7. And when I landed in London, and a friend of mine understood that I'm going down south, he said, what can I help with? What do you need? And I said, if you could go to a store and find some watches. I meet him there on the airport, he gives me the bag, he says, the stores were closed, but I found something. I said, okay, thank you. As we're preparing our gear, I open the bag, and I see that his kids, and all the kids in all the neighborhood, 10 years old, took off their watches and gave it to us. And they wrote on the back, "L'chayalim shelanu hagiborim, we love you. Tishmeru al atzlechem." I can't explain to you how incredible that was. And I don't know about you guys, but when I was 10, my watch was my everything. And they just took it off, and when it's hard and when times seem bleak, there's a pasuk of Rav Kook that I like to remind myself of. Me'at min ha'or doche harbe min ha'choshech. A single ray of light can banish great darkness. And And so while we are facing arguably our most challenging time in the history of the state of Israel, we still have to remember that there are rays of light and that there are a lot of things that can be done. And I'll touch on that later on. One of the organizations that I'm helping now is called Hamiluimnikim, okay? It's part of a larger organization, the named Nifkashim, that's doing incredible work. And the idea is, how do we help the reservists and their families? And there are multiple ways of doing this. And I have afterwards a barcode here if anybody's interested. You could donate money, which is very important and helpful. But there are other ways to get involved too. And to mention one of the initiatives, Our Mishpacha, is an initiative that brings together families in the US to families of reservists in Israel and pairs them together. And you build a relationship. You have a Zoom call once a week. And it's incredible. I love the idea when I heard of it, but only when I heard the feedback from both the Israeli side and the American side was I really so impressed. The Israeli side, they say to me, I couldn't believe that there were so many people abroad in New York that care about me so much. You have to remember, not all the Israelis have cousins and relatives, you know, in New York and LA or Miami. Not everybody is aware of what a strong and beautiful community you guys have here. And then, of course, on the American side, I'm speaking to a family from Lawrence, New York, and they say to me, I can't explain to you how inspiring it is to meet this family. And it's inspiring for me and my wife, and also my kids, to see it. And they talk. So I'm going to share the barcode afterwards, and anybody who wants to get involved. There are many ways to do it, and everyone can do it in their own unique way. I want to now show a little bit of visuals that maybe will help just explain a little bit and picture. So this is from the training, okay? This is my team. And you could, if we'd have time, I'd let you guess where I am, but we don't have much time for that. This is us at the end of a Krav Maga, hand-to-hand combat training. We go through counterterrorism school, which is one of the most rigorous trainings, and this is at the end of the Mesakim Krav Maga. This is called Mesakim Tzafon. You do miyam leyam, from Yam Kinneret to Yam Tichon, only a little bit of a detour. And again, you're carrying 60 or 70% of your body weight. So this is at the end of that training. I think one of the most important things that I personally learned from the Army and from my unit is the true power of resilience. You know, it's something we talk about, but we never fully understand how much more we have left, even when we think that we're finished. And it could be when we're doing a task at school. It could be, I don't know, for me, sometimes with my kids, and I've had it. All the many challenges that we have on our day-to-day life, we are capable of so much more than what we think we are. I want you to just notice something in this picture. I mentioned before about the ceramic vest. It's hard to really explain in words, but you see the color of the shirt, yeah? So this is the same shirt that we're wearing for a week. You don't want to see what happens underneath the shirt. Or you didn't want to see my feet after 11 days without... But you don't think you're capable of doing it. But again, we're capable of doing so much more than we believe we are. October 7th, this is my kids giving me a bracha before I left. Give them the bracha, the Birkat Kohanim, on Erev Shabbat. And on the left here, this is my dad when he met me at the airport. These are my kids. And this is a bracelet. I bought socks, and they had this ribbon there. And thank God I had this idea because they were crying when I was getting ready to leave. And we said, this is going to be our special bracelet that they wear during the day. And anytime it's hard for them, they touch the bracelet and they know that I'm there with them. This is the team of 6 right before we went in. And I wanted to share 2 quick anecdotes here. First is the food intake. It's amazing to think about it, but when we went in, for the first 2 days, we didn't eat anything. Not because we didn't have food. We did bring some food. Very little, because you're carrying a lot of water and equipment and other things. But your body is in such stress and adrenaline that we literally just did not think about food. We drank a ton because we were sweating like crazy, but in 2 days, we maybe had like an energy bar. And it was after 2 days of being in this extreme situation, right, in war and fighting, that we suddenly, had a few minutes and we said, we should take out a sandwich, we should, it's a good opportunity to eat now. Again, stretching your capabilities, much more than you'd think. If you would have asked me on October 6th, if I could, fast on Shiva Saba Tammuz, I'd say, oh my God, I barely make it. And this is in an air conditioning room, wearing comfortable clothes. So the second thing was getting out for the first time. So when we went in, we were in for 14 days. This is 14 days where I'm not available with my phone. I don't have my phone with me. And my wife and I didn't see each other for 5 weeks. It kind of felt like World War II many times, because I can't explain to you. I mean, just imagine, okay? Those of you who are married and those of you who aren't. 5 weeks not seeing your spouse. Out of those 5 weeks, most of the time, unavailable. And when I say unavailable, I'm not saying like when I go on a business trip and I'm in meetings, right? I'll call you in an hour. I'll call you in a few hours. I am unavailable. As my wife says, I can't explain to you what it means to send you a text to the WhatsApp and to see one check. And this is something that all my friends kept telling me as well. They kept checking the message. Did he see it? Did he open it? 14 days. And so writing these letters was a tremendous experience, because you're writing letters, to your family. And my wife wrote me a letter, and she always says, what do I write him? Do I tell him how hard it is? No, I want him to be strong. Do I tell him that the kids fell apart? No, I want him to be strong. But I have to share with him what's happening. And she says, what if this is the last letter he'll ever read? This is my wife, Nama, when we met after 5 weeks. I got out of Gaza at 9 a.m. She landed at about 7 a.m. Thank God it worked out well. This is a funny story. As we were walking to the place where we were gonna sleep for a few hours and take a shower, there was a whole balagan with the rooms, and they said, okay, you're gonna have to wait a bit. And we found ourselves waiting for a few hours. So first thing, of course, you take off your shoes, and it's an incredible feeling. And Naama calls me and she says, listen, I'm so sorry, I'm so wiped out. She flew with 3 little kids across the Atlantic just now. Is it okay if I rest for like half an hour, an hour? I said, of course, take your time. I said, I'm not wearing a ceramic vest, I'm not wearing equipment, and I'm barefoot, I'm grass. I'm golden. I don't need anything. But anyway, because it wasn't, the showers weren't ready, me and my friend went down to the beach. It was in Ashkelon. And these 2 police officers stop us and say, the beach is closed, you can't go in. Because they were still firing missiles in Ashkelon. And it was November, right? or December, so the beach anyway isn't very active, but they said, you can't be here. And so we look at them and we say, okay. And they look at us and they say, did you guys just come out of Gaza? And we say, yeah. So they look at us and they say, wow. So they look like this and they say, all right, you guys take care. And they go away and we look at each other and we run to the water and go in and out. It was like a silent understanding that they said, why don't you guys go take a quick... I took this picture because I remember it being extremely moving, right? This was a sign that they had up there, תשמעו לנו על הבית, אנחנו מחכים לכם פה. And I think it's so important to just understand how difficult the situation is on families. I'll touch on it later on. This is us in Gaza. These are some of the evacuations. Again, I share some of the pictures, of course nothing graphic that is hard to see, but just because I feel and I'm told that it helps to visualize, because many people don't necessarily know what it looks like and so on. This is my friend Zusman, he was with me in my original team, so we've been serving together for more than 20 years. SAR, the school where my kids go to in Riverdale, sent this granola pack that they donated for an Israeli food company to create. So they were helping an Israeli business, and I'm sitting there in Gaza. Somebody says, guys, we have got some granola snacks. Does anybody want? I'm like, sure. A friend of mine throws it to me, and I see on the, like, just looking at my eye, I see the logo of SAR, and it's like this colorful rainbow, you know. And sure enough, so I had to take a picture of that. This is some of the stuff that we found in some of the houses that we were searching, RPGs. This is a dedication for a medical book. We dedicate this work to the soul of Palestinian martyrs who will sacrifice their blood for Palestine at Al-Aqsa. This is Sela, one of my best friends, who was severely wounded on October 7th. Again, you have to excuse me, our time is limited, so I'm kind of brushing through it, but I could and should spend at least 10 minutes on every single one of these stories because they're incredible. You see the nurse that's holding his hand. If you look carefully, he almost lost his hand. So she's doing physical therapy that's trying to help the muscles and the ligaments. This is his son, Ori, and this is the bullet that was in his spine that they took out. He unfortunately still has shrapnel in his vertebrae, and he can't sit. He can't walk yet, but he can't even sit. This is me and the family when I came back to New York, and also I did a number of interviews. This one was for NBC. I want to move on. This is, first of all, again, something you don't necessarily think about, right? But it happens in Gaza. This is us, but two of the guys are the new guys that switched the other two because they couldn't return. And these are just a bunch of incredible people that, you know, just keep coming and helping us, giving us some homemade sandwiches, coming to do a barbecue. This is the Chapak, our team with the wives, spouses. And if you really want to get inspired, I urge you to go to Tel HaShomer and to hospitals where you see injured soldiers, because this was one of the most incredible things I've seen. You see here a soldier who lost one of his feet, and they brought equipment to build a coffee table for the machlaka, for the hospital. So the sense of building something and doing something. And here they are. They're building it out, they're measuring it. They have, one or two people who are carpenters that are helping them, kind of just guiding them through how they do it. It's unbelievable. I want to end with an interesting analogy that I find very interesting, that for years I've been kind of talking about in different aspects. Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh, right? From Sefer Dvarim. There's a lot of things that we could learn from plants, specifically when we think about hardship and when we think about resilience. So just a few quick examples. This is a paroshit galonit. It extracts salt and then it coats its leaves with salt to help with the radiation so it loses less water. You have the zugan asiach. If you can see, half of it is, so to speak, dead, but it only looks dead. It basically does something called reversed foliage, which means, like the trees here in the winter shed their leaves, it does the same thing, because this way it loses less water. And then the minute there's a little bit of rain, it grows back. So we have all these ways of dealing with the hardship, right? If you notice, next time you're in a desert, you'll see that most of the greenery and the trees that you see and the plants happen in the vadi, in the actual river. So they gravitate towards that area because that's where, if there is any water, that's where it would be. These are two other examples. Hamaluach, the salt bushes, they're called the chips of the desert. They're actually quite tasty. But also, a lot of these different techniques that we see how plants know how to build resilience when it's hard. This is Shoshanat Yericho. This is how it looks throughout the year, the dry one. And if you put it in water, after about 5 minutes, it opens up to this beautiful flower. So it keeps itself, preserving its energy, and it waits and waits and waits, and the minute there's a little bit of water, then it opens up to reproduce. I think there's a lot that we could learn from plants in that sense. Different people have different coping mechanisms. For some of us, it's hard to hear the news. For some of us, it's hard to see different things. We're all different. But what's amazing is the cliche of the sentence, comfort zone is nice, but nothing grows there. It's effectively what happens with plants. I have a friend who's a botanist, and I went to his house 2 months ago, and he showed me this special plant. It's like very thin leaves, and I see him brushing it. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm brushing the leaves to make it more flexible and to challenge it." I said, what do you mean? He said, "It makes you stronger and more resilient." In the 1920s, people from the Aliyah Shniya were trying to build the kibbutzim in Israel. There was no water. So Machon Weizmann started drip irrigation technology. If anybody's familiar, netafim. What does it mean? I don't have a lot of water, so I can't just water the plants in the orchards like I want. So I put these little drips irrigations that they give it water, but just enough. And apparently the produce of the plants and of the trees have a higher yield because they're challenged. And so again, same thing with us. Even though we don't like hardship, it's not fun, but we actually grow from it. עם הנצח לא מפחד מדרך ארוכה. Right? The people of eternity aren't afraid of the long and winding road. I want to end with something that we did for Mishloach Manot. We bought jams from Kibbutz Erez that you see in the picture. There's a famous Israeli song, Achachita Tzomachat Shuv. We won't get into it now. Again, we're short in time. I want to read to you what we wrote. These jams are sourced from Kibbutz Erez near the Gaza border. Kibbutz Erez served as our starting point when we entered Gaza in October. During that time, the Sukkot were still up, and the kibbutz fields lay burnt and damaged. 3 months later, as we departed Gaza, we noticed that the fields have been plowed and the crops were beginning to grow. For us, these jams symbolize resilience and renewal, reflecting the ability to regenerate and start anew. I think that for all of us, especially in these days of Bin HaMetzarim, I think it's important for us to, first of all, remember that there are rays of light, and to remember that there's great resilience that comes and that is born from these dark times and difficult times. And we know that Am HaNetzach lo mefachad miderech aruka, and we know that Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you. While Rav Aiki is coming, I just want to mention, we'll put chairs, right? To mention here the barcodes that I said before, because the example of what people are facing now, the families, it's extremely challenging. But let's how are we doing time-wise?
Doing great.
Are we? Okay. Yeah, so we'll do the Q&A.
Okay, so first of all, who was able to catch their breath? Just again, another personal thank you from Shai. Does anybody have a pressing question that you really want to know right now? That would be from Shai. We could lead with you, or I could break the ice. Okay, yeah, sure. So.
I have a question. I'm a third grade teacher, and we sent letters and all of that stuff, bracelets. But now I see that you have the mishpacha thing. Is there a way to connect schools and kids to kids?
100%. 100%. Yes, you can barcode the link. Our mishpacha, you'll see the.
Okay, got it.
But speak to me afterwards. Happy
Okay.
to. And I have to tell you that we received many letters from schools, and you have these cute little notes. A lot of them with the typos and it was the most incredible thing. It's hard to explain. It was the most moving thing. Actually, in our base, I have a picture of it. In our base, we put them all up. We took like a wall and we hang them all up. And it's just it's such a small thing that it was very moving for us.
After the war will finish, I would assume that a lot of people will get salashing from this situation. That's all.
Correct. Tziyun L'Sheva.
Excellent.
It's an excellence award.
Okay, so Shai, so we had a couple of questions that we wanted to, really just get to know you on a personal level. So you spoke a lot about, wearing your ceramic vest and the boots and not being able to take things off. Outside of that, what was really your biggest challenge coming back to your tzivit? You mentioned, at your age and really relating to the guys under such stress from October 7th. But what was the greatest challenge? Even though you're fearless, but what was the greatest challenge?
First of all, I'm not fearless, and it's actually one of the things that we always tell our soldiers, because many times it happened, that people brought it up. People said, "Listen, I'm scared," and we were all scared. And being scared is a good thing because it keeps you sharp, and it helps you, differentiate between doing something foolish. And it's not just about, go get him. You have to be smart, especially with all the booby traps. We had multiple situations where we, I think it was very challenging. The transition was not easy, especially leaving my wife and kids. The team, I know all these guys, but I'm on the older side now. Because I'm an officer, like my guys, most of them are already out of reserve duty. A lot of them came back, of course, on October 7th. But for the past few years when I was doing reserve duty, so I'm on the older side. But I think as you get older and as you have kids, it's very different, you know, being in the active duty when you're a young officer, lochem, you know, in Sayed Givati is one thing. And then you have kids, it's a little bit different. To be honest, I wasn't afraid so much for me, if that makes sense. I was afraid for my family. I was afraid for my soldiers and their families. I mean, I love life, but there's something extremely powerful with knowing that you're doing arguably the most meaningful thing that you could ever do. And that's what I felt, that's what we felt, and that's what gave us strength. I told, you know, my parents asked, all the people asked, I said, if I need to die, what better way to die than protecting someone?
One of the most special things that you mentioned about, you know, your background and what you continue to do now is, you know, raising your family, you know, with Torah and mitzvot. And there's so many really, truly heroic stories of soldiers, you know, keeping up with their limud or making it a priority. And, you know, coming from our community here with the Tanakh study event, you know, Jesse's in the crowd, you know, helping the entire community make sure that they keep up with daily learning. So what is Torah life like on the front lines, if anything, and how did it impact it either for better or for worse on the front lines?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I studied in the Yeshiva in Eli, and Eli lost 46 alumni so far, 22 of them since October 7th. It's unbelievable. And they're very, you know, there was a very big emphasis on the fact that you are doing a mitzvah. Yes, you need to keep up with Torah mitzvot. You need to daven, you need to lishmor al atzmecha, right? The way we all do on a day-to-day basis. But you have to remember that the essence of what you're doing in the army is Ezer Yisrael Miyad Tzar, and you are now doing your duty in the chain of Jewish history, you know. So there's something very powerful about that was kind of really engraved in me and a lot of you know, people in these kind of yeshivot. So I think that's one thing that's always important to remember. Having said that, you of course, you know, you want to stay connected, you need to stay connected, and so on. You're not always fighting also. You're not always training rigorously also. So you have to make sure. So I remember there was one rabbi that gave me a beautiful idea, and I really stuck with it, truth is till this day. He said, take something small. You know, don't do the daf yomi while you're doing a maslula, you know, a 16-month training in Sayed Givati. Azov, find something small that you enjoy, that you connect with, and build it in it as a routine that, you know, that's it. It's rock solid and nothing's gonna move that. And so what I did was I stacked a habit of, you know, after I daven in the morning, after I put on tefillin, because sometimes it's mamash just la'aniach tefillin in a minute, v'zeu, to study something. And I remember I said to myself, I'm gonna study something. Sometimes it's gonna be just a paragraph, it's gonna be a page, it's gonna be 5 minutes, whatever it is, but there's something. Any yom that I'm not gonna do that. And that was tremendous for me. I was able to do it, Baruch Hashem, and till this day the truth is, I keep doing it, and the amount of books and Sfarim, you know, and 2 Sidrei Mishnah, and the Tanakh twice, you know, because each day you just do a perek. But it adds up, and you know, sometimes you have more time, so you continue. So that's something that really helped me. I do want to share a funny story. I was in a delegation, when I was in officer's training school, there was a delegation to the German army. And this was quite interesting because it's a very, you know, nichshav thing. They said to me in officer's training school, listen, you're chosen to go on this delegation. It's 10 cadets out of 600. It's a big honor. And I said to him, thank you. So my commander called me to his office. I said, thank you, but I don't want to go to Germany. He said, what do you mean? I said, oh, no, both my grandparents saw Holocaust survivors. I said, give it to someone else. He said, take the weekend to think about it. I get home, it's Friday, and I'm helping my mom in the kitchen. She says, how's your week? I say, it was good, thank God, whatever, Yeah, there's this delegation to Germany, I don't know, but I'm not going. And she stops, kind of slicing the onion, and she says, to think about my father, meaning my grandfather, who was in Auschwitz and Buchenwald, to think that his grandson will serve in the IDF and will be an officer in Seyret Givati. And there's a delegation with the German army, And as she was saying it, it just gave me perspective and context. And I just said, wow. I said, okay, I'm gonna go. And I carried, he has some of the camps they had the tattoo, of course, but they also had like a pin with a number, which was like their ID, so to speak. And so my mom has it. And so I took it with me and I held it with me the whole trip. But long story short, I go to this delegation and I was the only one who kept kosher. You may find it hard to believe. Some of you are more familiar with Israel, some aren't. But I was in this delegation. Out of 10 soldiers, I was the only one who kept kosher. And my dad, who takes a lot of groups to Poland and whatnot, said, take some extra tuna or whatever. No, he said, make sure there's kosher food. I said to him, what do you mean? It's a delegation of the army. Of course we're going to. He said, make sure. I speak to the guy in charge of the logistics. He said, of course, bevadai, ma. I say, okay. I said, you sure? He said, betach. I said, okay. Sure enough, no kosher food. So I find myself eating tuna and crackers for 10 days straight. And we get to Munster, and we're meeting the second in command of the whole German army, who is de facto in charge of all of all the intelligence units, all the tanks, all the infantry, and we're sitting there, and there's golden cutlery, this beautiful campus, and they open up this beautiful, and I'm starving right now, right? It's 10 days and I'm eating a cucumber and whatever, and he says what's going on? Why is he? And my commander, says, oh, he keeps kosher. So he says, why didn't you tell me? And my commander was embarrassed, of course. He says, I have a Chabad house in Dresden. I could have. Anyway, he felt terrible. And after the meal, we sat there kind of in this, by the fireplace and some drinks. And he was very intrigued. It was also disengagement at the time. So he was very curious to hear my perspective. And he said, so what have you been doing all this time? What did you eat? I said, whatever, tuna crackers. He said, wow, must have been hard. So I said to him in Yiddish, look, my grandma always used to say, Shver zu sein Yid, which means it's hard to be a Jew. And as I said it, I can't believe that I said this to the second in command, and he, of course, understood the Yiddish, and he went to me like this, and he tapped me on it. But anyway, I think at the end of the day, the purpose is what helps. I think we all struggle, even when I'm in my comfortable home in Riverdale, right, and working in the office, we have that struggle of, how we fit in Torah and what capacity and so on. But I first of all believe that the deeper purpose of what we do and what we represent, for me, is more important. And I think that also fuels me, for the other aspects.
No, Jesse.
So, what was that perspective on the disengagement that you told us, second in command, the German officer, and how do people in Israel relate to that in hindsight there?
It's a very good question. So first of all, I have an interesting perspective on Gaza in general, just because I served in the Gaza Strip before the disengagement. So we had Gush Katif and we were doing operations. During the disengagement, I was in officer training school, so we were there. It was horrific. And then after the disengagement, as an officer, we carried out, covered ops that each one needed to be signed by the Prime Minister, because it's behind enemy lines, and then of course, now. Look, you're asking about the actual disengagement, if it was a mistake or not?
This is what you told him.
Oh, well, what I told him, we were talking mostly about the different parts of the Israeli society. In other words, he assumed, you know, he's a smart guy, he assumed that I was religious, right? And he knows that a lot of people in Gush Katif were religious, and he was just very interested in how the dynamics now in Israel with the disengagement going on. And I shared to him that, you know, I shared with him that it's extremely difficult, and especially in the army, where it's a tzva'am, so you have so many people from different, you know, walks of life within Israel, and some of the people live in Gush Katif, let alone support the disengagement or oppose the disengagement. It's a very, very, very conflicted and charged issue. But the bottom line is that I said that the vast majority of us understand. There was like a famous sticker that said, "Rak shelo nitnatek echad mehasheni." Right? So hitnatkut, okay? But let's make sure that we're not separating from ourselves as a nation.
How is your wife handling all of this? I mean, she's at Columbia, she's in hell, and you're in hell, so how did she deal with this?
I don't know. The short answer is she has a W under her shirt because she is Wonder Woman. That is the honest truth. I think, and this kind of just taps into what I was saying before about the Miluimnikim. People don't really understand how difficult this is. And actually, we just spoke in KJ in the Upper East Side, and when they asked me to speak on Shabbat, I said, I'll speak, but I have a suggestion. After I speak, you should have 5 minutes of Nama speaking, my wife, to hear that perspective. And it was unbelievable. First of all, she's amazing, period. But it was unbelievable for people to hear the perspective of a wife, of a spouse that went in to fight. Because you don't hear that usually. And I can't explain to you what people are going through. If I could just share, I mean, do you know, friends of mine, I have a friend who has a kid in 3rd grade that started wetting the bed. Older kids checking the news all the time because they know their dad is up north or in Gaza, knowing that at any point in time, officers could knock on the door because it happened to their neighbor. It happened to their cousin. It happened to their classmate. It literally did. There are so many difficult stories. I could tell you one of my teammates, his hand can't function. He specifically also unfortunately has a very bad case of PTSD. And his wife is a partner at Ernst & Young. And she left her job 2 weeks ago because she said, my house is falling apart. And so I urge you to take the barcode and to look into Miluimnikim and to look into our mishpacha to see how you can help, because you can. And every little helps. And after you've donated whatever you can, look at our mishpacha. Speak to your family. Maybe it's not relevant for you. Maybe it's relevant for one of your siblings. It's an incredible thing. And this, I feel, people here in the US don't see enough. There's so many things. There's so many initiatives, and everything's important. You're not going to hear from me. But personally, people who know Israel understand that Miluimnikim is the backbone of Israeli society. The people who are fighting now, and their families, mamash and their families, as one, are the people who are not only defending the country, but they're also the ones who are working and paying taxes. They are the soul of Israel and the spirit of Israel. Mamash kacha. So there are more barcodes here, and I urge you to have a look and share with your friends.
How come Israel did not take seriously all the intelligence that came out from everywhere against Hamas attack? You can answer that. It's different.
It's a good question. There isn't one answer. I think the short answer is, what's it called? Hubris?
Yeah, hubris.
Hubris? Hubris is probably the short answer. I think we're full of ourselves as a nation. I think we were sure that we're the strongest army in the Middle East for sure. I think we're sure that the technology that we have,
They underestimate.
well, we 100% underestimate it. But you also have to remember that when you're defending, you have to defend all the time. When you're attacking, you need to succeed once.
Right.
It's also something that's important. I'm not taking off the failure of October 7th. I'm just saying it's
It is a failure, a big failure.
100%.
Shai, just to close,
Yeah.
we just wanted to know, so how do you, for us, living in Chutz La'aretz, but again with strong ties, there's been a lot of anxiety and nerves, and especially in the age of social media. So how does somebody like you who's on the front lines, who has experience, how do you see the conflict ending? Is it only ending with Mashiach, or is it going to end with now in an election year of the United States, try to catch them off guard, and that's how we're going to finish? Are we going to be able to do what we need to do? How do you see, in your opinion, how do you see it ending?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll start with the personal war that we're all experiencing, like each one individually, and then the broader war. The personal war, my 2 cents, let's reduce social media. Let's use less social media. It's good for our sanity, it's good for our mental health, and guess what? It is the main tool that's polarizing all of us, both in the US, within the US, in Israel, within Israel. It's terrible. There's a lot of great things about social media, but we should reduce our intake. I think, tachlis, there's the macro and the micro and the macro, specifically with Gaza and the West Bank for that matter. Nothing is going to really fundamentally change until we change the education, because the syllabus, right, the syllabi that they're teaching in the schools in Gaza is the same one that they teach in the West Bank, and that is from the river to the sea, right? And what does that mean? It means that Israel doesn't have a right to exist. So when you're raising people and children and telling them that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, and that killing Jews is a mitzvah, and that being a shaheed is what you long for, and you're paying, giving an allowance and funds for shahid's family, then nothing's going to change, and we're going to have to keep defending ourselves and fighting like that. For that, you need the Saudis, you need another player. The US, of course, could play a critical role to have a larger aspect of the solution. The main issue here, of course, is the Palestinians. I hate to say it like this, but they're just a tool. Most of the Arab world doesn't really care about the Palestinians that much. And we've seen it time and time again. It's Iran, right? It's the Saudis, it's Qatar. And so what I think we all fail to see, America included and Israel, is that we keep attacking the shluchot of Iran, but we never attacked Iran itself. And American citizens were killed in the embassy. And we and them knew that it was Iran, but nobody attacked Iran. We attacked and I think that's also something that may have to change. So how will it end? God knows. Mashiach is definitely a good option. But I think that it would be good for all of us to take a deep breath, unfortunately. To take a deep breath and remember that this is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And I urge you also to think that when thinking about supporting Israel, you mentioned that October 7th, everybody was going strong, but there's fatigue, and it's only natural, right? There's different type of fatigue, right? There's fatigue in Deal, and there's fatigue in Israel for a family that's serving in Miluim, but everyone is where they are. But people, everyone, that's what I meant about the ray of light before, everyone here, even if you're far away, and even if you don't have a lot of money, you still can make an impact. That's what I urge us all to remember, all of us. We all can make an impact, even if it's small, right? Rav Kook says, "Me'at min ha'od uchechem, arbe min ha'choshech."
I want to thank Shai again. If anybody, please take a barcode, and he'll be available to speak.